on it. Look at my abs. Okay, I'll look at your abs. So I click on it and it's Matt's profile. And I'm like, okay, this guy looks really familiar. I think I know who he is. And there's pictures of him in a wrestling ring. There's a picture. I don't have his book in my office right now. I'm almost positive there's a picture of him in the insert section of his book, but it's him wearing a Cardinals jersey that's probably 2 sizes too small. And he's lifting it up. And literally, you can see his six pack. So that's the center of his collage. And then literally, I'm not kidding, Gabe, the rest of his collage are pictures of his abs, just cropped. Just his abs. So I'm like, okay, there's a couple of other pictures of his face. So I can kind of put together who this guy is. And I'm like, okay, he looks super familiar. I think I know who this is. So I sent him a message and we traded screen names so we could start talking on AOL, Instant Messenger, AIM. And as they say, the rest is history. We stayed up, talked literally for hours. I knew that he was a wrestler, but the funniest part of all of this, so when he and I met online again, his family had moved away. So we met in July of 2003 online. His family had just moved away in May. So he had only been gone for like 2 months. They moved up to Hesperia, California, which is about an hour from Rancho. And as we're talking and we're trading stories, he knew where I lived, but I had no idea where he lived. And we were literally like, he was on the main road and I was a street off of that. So we could have walked to each other's houses all of those years that we grew up. We had no idea that we were practically in each other's backyard. What's even crazier is that I found out that he had these wrestling shows all the time and just wrestling in general in his backyard. And they had fireworks and music and all these things. And I never heard anything about it. Never heard any of the fireworks. Like, I must have just been in my own world. So anyways, it was kind of funny, like when we started connecting the dots and I realized like where he lived. And he used to walk past my house every day when he would walk to school because our house backs right up to the elementary school that we went to. There's a park there. My parents have been in that house for over 30 years. And so he was like, yeah, I know exactly where you live. He's like, we used to walk by there all the time when we go to school. And like, that's so crazy. Like how it blows my mind sometimes, like when we go back and we have conversations about like different things that we did as kids. And it was always like in the same place. And like, we just our paths never crossed until online of all times. And his family had moved away and they weren't in Rancho anymore. So, but yeah, I knew about it. I didn't take the wrestling seriously at first because I thought it was just kind of a hobby. And then as I got to know him more and more, I realized that it was a really big part of his life. And he told me that he had actually, because I knew that he didn't graduate from the same high school that I did. We both went to Altaloma High School. And I knew that he had gone there, but I didn't recall him graduating or seeing him be a part of the seniors or anything. And I found out that his mom, he'd actually convinced his parents to take him out of traditional high school and let him finish up his high school years at home, basically doing homeschool so that he could focus on the wrestling. So his dad built him a wrestling ring for his 16th birthday in his backyard. He graduated early from an independent charter, like homeschool, basically. And when I heard all of that, I was like, okay, this guy is like really into this wrestling stuff. Like I had known a little bit about it, but I was never really into it. My dad was always big into it. Like I knew who Matt Hardy was and I knew who Jericho was. And, my dad would have it on for SmackDown and Raw all the time. But I don't think he ever really watched any of the pay-per-views that I can recall. So like I knew a little bit. And then Matt would, like once we started really dating, we'd go out. Usually Fridays was like our day. Like we'd go and have dinner and a movie or, whatever. And there were times where he would end up breaking our plan so that he could go do a wrestling show and make $20 or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, this sucks. Like I'm kind of being pushed to the number 2 spot. Like I really like this guy, but I don't want to be number 2 to some silly, hobby that's not going to go anywhere. So it seemed like anytime that we fought, like that was always kind of the basis of it. Like it always came back to the wrestling. So I had a very hard time with it. I was not a fan of it. I was as supportive as I could be. I think I was very supportive for a while. He would always have guys over at his house working out. Every Saturday they would have a wrestling show in their backyard. So I was always there. I would help his mom make food for the guys and make sure that they were all drinking plenty of water. And I would go backstage and help Matt lace up his wrestling boots. I would help him get his hair wet and everything ready for his entrance. And then 2004 was right after I graduated. I'm sure you probably saw the picture because I'm almost positive he put the picture in the book of me walking him out for his entrance for Highway to Hell 4 in his parents' backyard. Um, so that it was a funny time. Like we crack up because that was such a huge moment for him at that point. Like it was a very big deal. And he was nervous asking me to like walk him out for his entrance.
Oh,
It was so funny. So, it's something that we joke about, but yeah, I wasn't ever a fan of it. I did give him an ultimatum at one point in our relationship and said, look, like it's either me or it's the wrestling because I was tired of him breaking our dates to go wrestle. And I didn't understand at that point, like he needed to do that to kind of further their career and their path that they wanted to take. I was still in the mindset, like this was going to be a phase that was going to end at some point, even though I knew he was obsessed with it. And he lived and breathed wrestling. Like, I think that there was just a part of me that was holding on to some type of hope that he would end up going back to school and like getting a degree or just getting like a normal, 9-to-5 job and not rely on trying to chase this dream that maybe wouldn't happen. Like we obviously didn't know, he's still young too. Like it's kind of crazy. So, we broke up. And this was in 2005, 2006. We were broken up for almost a year and a half and kind of had written each other off. Like we really didn't talk a whole lot more. And I had started seeing other people. He was starting to see other people. And we would touch base every once in a while. But I think we both had our guards way up. Like we didn't want to kind of fall into old habits and start going through all of that again. And I was out in Vegas for my 21st birthday. So now this is spring of 2007. I had some friends that were out there with me and I ended up kind of being the third wheel on my birthday weekend and I was kind of bummed. And so I called Matt because that's who I would always go to whenever I was down or whatever. Like he was always the first person I want to talk to. And I had all of my family there. My parents were there. My grandparents were there. My brother and his friend were there. I had aunts and uncles. Like a ton of people came out to have like a fun weekend for my birthday. And so I called Matt and asked him to drive up to Vegas. So he made the 3.5 hour drive, whatever, by himself in the middle of the night. I basically snuck him into the hotel because I didn't want to tell my family that he was there because they knew our history and our past and they were happy that I was finally, or so I thought, like getting over him and kind of moving on. And so we just kind of reconnected. We had a really good weekend and we just decided that we wanted to get back together and try things again. And he flat out told me, he's like, if we're going to do this again, he's like, we are going to get married. He's like, I'm not playing this back and forth thing anymore. He's like, I already know in my heart that you're the person I'm supposed to marry. You're going to be the one that I end up with for the rest of my life. He's like, I don't care if that scares you. He's like, that's how I feel. And if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right this time. It's like, okay, fair enough. So we started dating again. Our families were not happy. I remember being at his house with his parents and his dad basically was asking me like, what's going to be different about it this time? Like they didn't want me to break his heart again. And fair, like I probably would do the same thing if it was our daughter with a boy. And my parents had their reservations about the wrestling thing because I had told them, I didn't think it was going to go anywhere with him. And so we got back together my birthday in April and we were engaged by August. So only 4 months later after we got back together. And then we got married the following year in fall of 2008. So, and we've been together since. So, he definitely has opened my eyes. It taught me a lot to trust him and his kind of his gut instincts. Like he's got probably the best instincts of anyone I've ever met in my life. Like now when he has a feeling about something, I go with him. Like even if I have some kind of reservation, I'll tell him what that is, but we'll usually talk through it. And then he makes me feel better about what he's kind of thinking. So, and that kind of plays into later on down the line with AEW and WWE conversations and everything too. But that's some of our background and our history together. the
And I think
beginning.
it's important. I think it's important because it really does inform what is on the horizon at this point in the story.
Right.
This is a podcast about doing things really well, and I want to cover with you the creation of that merch. And people throw around the word empire a lot when they're talking
Yeah.
about people who are successful, but this is really true. Like what you were able to accomplish with a little help from Matt and Nick.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. Like you go from gimmick tables at small wrestling shows to like the number one selling shirts at Hot Topic nationwide. That's for the uninitiated. Professional wrestling is a very niche community. It's a little more mainstream now than it has
Right.
been in about 20 years.
Right.
But at this time, especially, it's a niche community. And the fact that these shirts were the number one selling shirts at Hot Topic is just a huge mountain to climb. Let's rewind it back a little bit. When did the idea come with you and Matt and Nick to have you take the helm of the merch side of what they were doing? Is this around the time of
So,
Ring of Honor? Or?
I think it may have even been a little bit before Ring of Honor. So we had talked, I'm trying to think. I know that it was around the time I was pregnant with Courtney. So this is like 2011. This was right after they left TNA. Matt and Nick made the decision to leave TNA when I was literally like 6 or 7 months pregnant with Courtney. They left in July of 2011 and I was giving birth in October. And I remember being so freaked out thinking, what the hell did you just do? Like, we have a kid coming, whether you like it or not, in a few months. Like, what are we doing? And so they started hitting the indies really hard. At that point, I honestly thought that Matt might leave wrestling altogether. It was a very, very dark place for him. Nick too, but I feel like it hit Matt harder because we were expecting a baby. Nick and his wife had just gotten married. They were only married, gosh, maybe 4 or 5 months. But Nick had several conversations with Matt and convinced him to keep going. He's like, this isn't the end for us. Like, I see us going much further than this. Like, you need to just kind of get through it, kind of stick to the grind, keep doing what we're doing, hit it maybe a little bit harder. So that's kind of when we started having the conversations about other ways that we could bring in extra money besides just performing. And I remember Matt mentioning something about this guy named Colt Cabana and how he was like the merch king. And I said, well, put me in touch with him. Like, let me kind of pick his brain and see like where he gets his shirts printed, kind of what works. And Matt was like, oh, no. He's like, that's like taboo. Like, you don't go and ask for other people's secrets. And I'm like, well, screw that. Give me his number. I'll go ask him. I don't know. Like, at this point, I'm just like trying to grasp at whatever straws I can grab onto, knowing that we have a child, that's joining us in a few months. Like, even though I was working full time, I was barely making it. So, as far as like covering all of our bills and stuff. So they start wrestling more. We end up getting in touch with Ryan Barkin, who owns 1 Hour Tees at the time. And so this is before Pro Wrestling Tees even was a thing. So I started talking to him and he helped us put together, I don't remember if it was him that ended up helping us with the designs or if it was somebody else. But we had found out previously, before I got connected with Ryan, we had a really cool design. It was like a throwback kind of like the same imagery as the Rockers. And we did a shirt like that. Well, we found out when we went to go get it printed that it's very expensive if you have more than a couple colors on a shirt. And this design that we had done had like 12 colors. So we had to go back and like have it like narrow it down. So I learned a lot about the printing side of things very early on. And I kind of was the one that took over that since I already had the business background from working with my parents for so long. And then at this point I had been working in property management for a year and a half. So I had some other background too, in that industry also, and just kind of dealing with other businesses and vendors. And, Matt and Nick didn't really have that. And so I told them, I'm like, you guys focus on getting yourselves booked. I'll try and help you get like the shirt and, like other side of this going. So we went to Ryan. We did a small order, I think, of that first like Rockers style shirt. Didn't do very many and they went pretty quick. And then we did another shirt that was like an old Young Bucks logo. We had somebody from the United Kingdom design that for us. And that one we learned was a good one because we could print it on a black tee and it was only 2 colors. So it was like super cheap. It didn't cost a whole lot. And then we got the idea of doing a shirt that just said super kick, super kick, super kick, super kick on it. And it was just black ink. So it was only one color. That was like the best decision we ever made because